This is The Week on Word, a podcast featuring a roundup of the most interesting, informative, and entertaining interviews from Word Radio. You can listen to Word Radio anytime, anywhere on WURDradio.com and the Word Radio app. Give us a play and download it today. In this episode, Philadelphia Police Commissioner Kevin Bethel appeared on Wake Up with Word with Solomon Jones to provide an update on the ongoing investigation into the Lemon Hill shooting. And Jasmine Wright, a national political reporter with the Allbritton Journalism Institute, returned to Evening WURDs to unpack the Trump administration's highlighting its factual inaccuracies, broken links, and the broader implications for public trust in federal health messaging. But first, Carl Singley, retired dean of Temple University Law School and founder of one of Philadelphia's largest black law firms, joined Dr. James Peterson on Evening WURDs to discuss how President Donald Trump is undermining the foundations of American democracy through a sweeping series of executive orders.
Very excited and humbled to welcome to today's program Dean Carl Singley, who's had a diverse professional career as a practicing attorney in the private and public sectors, and as a legal educator and administrator. Professor Singley was a law professor at Temple University from 1974 to 2004 when he retired as professor emeritus and served as dean of Temple University's Beasley School of Law from 1983 to 1987. In 87, Dean Singley founded at one time the largest African-American law firm in Philadelphia and has served in the public legal sector as the first deputy city solicitor for the city of Philadelphia, special counsel to the MOVE Commission, special counsel to the Philadelphia City Council, and chairman of the Mayor's Commission on Construction Industry Diversity. Dean Carl Singley, welcome to Evening WURDs.
Doc, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Professor. I'm truly humbled to have you on this program. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to talk with us today about your very important article at the Philadelphia Citizen here for our Citizen Word segment on Evening WURDs. We appreciate your time, sir.
Surely.
Professor, so let's give folks a sense of this essay. It's a searing critique of President Trump's moves around executive orders. Talk to us a little bit in broad strokes first, and then we'll try to dial down on some of the orders that you think are more specious than others about what President Trump is doing with the powers of executive order and how it's eroding the infrastructure of American democracy.
Well, Doc, let me answer your question this way. I had a conversation with former Mayor Nutter a couple of days ago, who called me to say that he had read the piece, and then he made the joke. He said, "Well, why did you make me read 4,500 pages before you got to the conclusion?" He said, "Why did you bury the lead?" Right. He said, "So what?" And he said, "So what you're telling us is that we're screwed and we can't do anything until after Trump dies as a result of a natural death." That's basically what he said. And I'll get back to that in a minute. But basically, the purpose of the essay, which is one of three parts, is to look at what happened in the first 100 days with Trump in office and the lightning pace with which he started issuing orders that basically that were aimed largely at African Americans and everything that we've achieved. Most people focus on what he's doing with undocumented immigrants, his fight with Harvard and law firms and things of that nature. But what is not focused on, enough for me, is that in a very deliberate way, he has set about trying to undermine and dismantle over the 75 years of progress made on behalf of Black people, to benefit Black people. And he's using it as a cudgel. So he's using this diversity, equity, and inclusion idea to torture people, corporations, law firms. So in that period of time, his executive orders touched two different categories of people, both who were non-white. One were immigrants, undocumented. A lot of the executive orders and a lot of his campaign was based on deporting illegal immigrants or undocumented immigrants. What is not talked about is his systematic attack on dismantling every gain that Black people have made in the area of civil rights since Lyndon Johnson.
That's right.
And, I mentioned that because the brother Solomon Jones, who writes for the Inquirer, wrote an article a few weeks ago where he took the position that Black folks are not going to participate in these mass demonstrations that were going on at the time, and he came under fire for that. But what he was basically saying is Black people, and I believe he's right, are not concerned so much about immigrants being deported as they are about the state of our progress that is under fire by the Trump administration. Interestingly enough, he issued, in his whole first 4 years in office, he issued 200 executive orders. Not a one mentioned diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then in the last 130 days, he has issued dozens of executive orders that all reference diversity, equity, and inclusion. So Black people, God bless undocumented immigrants, but that's not my priority. It should not be our priority. Our priority is to try to offset and defeat this effort to undermine 75 years of progress for Black people.
So I want to think with you a little bit, Professor Singley, about how those things might be interlinked or not. But first, one of the important pieces from this first version, or this first installment of this series of essays, is you really give us a lot of clarity on the two constitutions, and I want you to share some of this with our listeners, because it's just a very, you argue that there are two constitutions. There's the first constitution that has those 7 articles, and then there's a second constitution that's adopted after the Civil War. Can we in layman's terms kind of break that down for the WRD audience?
And so what you need to understand is the first constitution that came after the Revolutionary War was really a document written by wealthy landowners, white men, many of whom were slave owners, so that they adopted a document that would govern a society that basically protected the interest of white men. And many of them were slave owners. And during the drafting of that first constitution, Thomas Jefferson actually had a provision in there that would condemn England's participation in the slave trade. Now, you understand, Thomas Jefferson did that at a time that he owned 100 slaves himself. So that's perhaps the first and earliest example of gaslighting on the issue of race in American politics. So that first constitution was not intended to be diverse, equitable, and inclusive. It was a document to protect the interest of white men and to preserve a society that was based on slavery. At the time of the Revolutionary War, there were 700,000 slaves in the colony. So then we had to fight a civil war that ended in 1865. So that Constitution is really the Constitution that gave us what we have: the 13th Amendment outlawing slavery, 14th Amendment due process, equal protection of the law, 15th Amendment giving, unfortunately, only Black men to vote. It would take the 19th Amendment to give women the right to vote. So that was our Constitution. Now, the point I make to you is that there has never been a reconciliation in American society between the original framers' notions of equality that did not include Black people, didn't include women, didn't include indigenous people, and the second Constitution that came after we lost 620,000 people in a protracted war. And even Lincoln himself never thought that Black people were equal to or were entitled to full equality. He said, if I could save the Union by freeing no slaves, I would do so. If I could save it by freeing some slaves, I would do so. If I could do it by freeing all of the slaves. And he was an early supporter of the American Colonization Society that had as its purpose sending us back to Africa. So throughout our history, there's been this war between the goals of the original Constitution, which was a white man's Constitution, and the second one, which was those provisions that protected us. And this business about a white Christian nation that you hear from the Christian nationalists, they date that to their Constitution. Because the second Constitution, after the Civil War in 1865, and there were various civil rights statutes passed over that period of time. And briefly, Doc, that little period only lasted 10 or 12 years before the South, the slave owners, figured out a way to re-enslave us, in fact. So from basic, and that was called Reconstruction.
That's right.
So they reinstituted black codes, Jim Crow laws that basically vagrancy statutes.
They weaponized the prison system to reset. Yes.
And in fact, the police departments that we have around the country really had their origins in those days when they were slave patrols.
That's right.
The first Constitution had a fugitive slave clause in there, believe it or not. Most people don't remember that, which meant that all of the states had to return slaves who fled from the South.
Right.
Now, the important thing to understand is the piece that I wrote quotes Malcolm. It didn't include it. I think they deleted it by mistake. But Malcolm X said, "The South is below the Canadian border." So essentially, what he was saying is that while the South had slaves and didn't believe in the equality of black people and fought all the way and lost lives to keep from freeing us, the North shared those same views. Many whites in the North shared those same views and, in fact, benefited from slavery. Textile mills, all in New England, counted on the slave labor.
And the banks of the North also benefited from it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And a lot of the financial institutions made hundreds of millions of dollars just profiting from this.
Yeah, Citibank owes us money, Professor Singley, right now.
And so the second Constitution is now being used, and this gets back to this immigrant issue. And my concern that you have a U.S. senator who went to Ecuador, or was it El Salvador?
Senator Holland from Maryland. He went to El Salvador to try to. One of his constituents, right? That man was from Maryland, so he's a senator for Maryland.
But he was an undocumented alien. But they were arguing his due process right.
That's right.
So what is lost on a lot of immigrants and a lot of Americans is where those due process rights came from. This argument of equal protection and where it came from.
That comes from us.
It came from black people. So I would have much rather have that senator. And these are performative acts, which is what the Democrats are doing now. They're trying to figure out how to respond to this butt whipping that Trump and the new right is giving to America right now. And so they're doing things that are performant. I don't hear him talking about what they're doing to the Smithsonian Institute, the African American Museum. I don't hear them raising hell about firing people who hold positions.
Firing the head of the Library of Congress, firing four-star generals who happen to be black, right? Yes.
Absolutely. I don't hear them talking about how the military academies have removed books using this notion of critical race theory, which is a way of whitewashing this despicable history of racism that has plagued this country since its inception.
That's right, Professor Singh. We got to take a quick break, but I want to give you a little breaking news. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has ordered the Navy to review the names of ships honoring civil rights leaders. You zero in on a short list of the foundational principles that you think are directly under threat, that are directly at risk under Trump 2.0. I want you to take us through a few of them, and then if you don't mind, I would love for you to prioritize them for us. So some of them are, the rule of law, balance of powers, freedom of speech, press freedom, equal protection, right to counsel. the emoluments clause, which I don't think people are talking enough about. Can you give us a sense of what that list is, or how you came to that list? And then is it too much to ask you to prioritize some of those for us in terms of the threat to democracy?
Well, Steve Bannon basically said that when Trump got back in the office, he would flood the zone, which means they would hit us with so many different tactics to undermine the Constitution. And I'm talking about both the First and the Second, because the First Amendment comes out of that first Constitution, right? Freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, all of the freedom of the press, all of those things are under fire. One of the rule of law, for example. So Trump, I would say that's a very high priority, because Trump is a guy that was twice impeached, lost a $400 million defamation judgment to a woman, found to have defrauded people, and was convicted of $400 million in fraud by the state of New York. And yet he pardoned the 1,600 insurrectionists that tried to overthrow the government. So what he's basically saying is that the rule of law, which is the idea that the law applies equally to everybody, apparently. So that, to me, is the most egregious and pernicious assault on the Constitution. And related to that is that everybody gets treated equal under the law, the Equal Protection Clause.
That's right.
But that's clearly not true. So he's thinking about settling for $5 million to the woman Ashley Babbitt's family, who was killed as they were attempted to overthrow the government. So if you ask me, and he's disrespecting court orders, he's ignoring them, he's defying court orders. So he's basically saying the law that applies to y'all don't apply to me, and he's getting away with it. So if you ask me what one or two are the most important, all of them are important.
Right. No, I wholeheartedly agree. Professor Singley, why do you think we're not seeing enough coverage of this president's violation of the emoluments clause? I mean, it feels like they could talk about the plane for a little while, but there's so many other things, the cryptocurrency, the pay to play dinners, there's so many other things that violate the emoluments clause, but it doesn't feel like...
You know what, I tell you, Doc, they have succeeded in overwhelming people.
Okay.
So that people just can't keep up with this stuff. Every day, like you just mentioned, Pete Hegseth.
Yeah.
Every day they do. Now, these people are masters of distraction. So that they, while they are picking our pockets, they are saying, look over here. Don't pay attention to what we're doing that's really fundamental. And that's what they have thrown so much stuff out there that people are just discouraged and overwhelmed and resigned that maybe this is how it's going to be. And that is the most important tool that an autocrat uses to convince people over whom they rule that it is hopeless to resist. That comes straight out of 1984 with George Orwell. So if I could tell you, this piece, the first piece, is designed to describe as comprehensively as possible how broad the assault is on American democracy against all kinds of people from all kinds of institutions and backgrounds. The second part is to figure out how they, in the second article is going to be called, How Trump and the Right Hijacked America. And they started this stuff when Ronald Reagan was president. So they have been methodically figuring out, because these people don't believe in democracy, American democracy. The tech bros, all of the categories of people, the Heritage Foundation, all of these right-wing organizations played a role in the 2025, Project 2025. And like the original framers of the Constitution, they don't believe that equality applies to men and women of all colors. And they certainly don't think it applies to immigrants, whether they are legal immigrants or not. And that's why Trump raised the issue about Obama and the whole birthright issue.
That's right.
Because you get to argue that y'all elected an immigrant, a guy who was not a brown immigrant president, and we need to set the record. We need to fix this, which is what the South said would happen. After the Civil War, the South vowed that they would rise again. And basically they have, both in the North and in the South.
We got a couple minutes left here, Professor. You do say there is good news in this first installment of the series.
Let me tell you the third piece is going to be what's the path forward? What do we do? Well, we need to start talking, make sure we understand how comprehensive and how broad-based this problem is and how systematic we have to go about addressing it. So start with the proposition that Trump is 79 years old, obviously in poor physical condition, obviously in mental and decline.
Yes.
So even if Trump could run, and he can't run for another term, he'll be 82 when his term comes up. And Trumpism is a cult. You understand that?
Yes.
So there's no heir apparent. None of these wannabe Trump guys running around can transfer that popularity. So what we need to be doing is looking at the next 30 months. And we have to identify all of the people on our side. And there are more of us than there are of them. But we can't have a one strategy fits all. Black people ain't going to worry about no climate change. Black people not going to be worried about whether immigrants, who, by the way, don't know that they are the beneficiaries of our struggles, we're not worried about them having due process. We need to, all of those issues that are part of the Democratic base, we need to figure out how to develop strategies that appeal to each one of the different people that were hurt, including former Trump supporters who are losing their livelihoods because of tariffs, farmers, all of them in the red states. A big plug of people that all we need are 4 million people. He beat Kamala Harris by 3 million votes.
That's right.
Surely there's at least 3 million people, and we get black people out to vote. We're not going to be marching in those streets for no climate change or nothing like that. But we need to get black people galvanized and get us to stop dancing to boots on the ground. I love that, by the way. But if we spend as much time learning about what's happening to us as we are trying to learn how to do boots on the ground, then maybe we would have a shot. So I think the good news is Trump ain't going to be around in 4 years. One way or another. Even if he's alive, he'll be irrelevant because he's incoherent and nonsensical when he talks right now. So that's a cult. It is not sustainable. So we need to start planning not for the next 30 years, but for the next 30 months. When we have an opportunity to take over the White House and take the House, Senate, and the House back. And I think that's where we should start, that kind of plan.
Professor, attorney, Dean Carl Singley, brother, you are brilliant. One of the most respected attorneys to ever come out of the city of brotherly love. We really, really appreciate you taking your time.
You're listening to The Week on Word. Represent your favorite station in style. Look for Afrocentric tees, hoodies, tumblers, notebooks, mugs, and more. Just click the shop tab at wordradio.com. Show the world that you're all about Black Talk Media.
You gotta look good.
This is The Week on Word, a podcast highlighting the top conversations on Word Radio. Make sure you look for us and follow WURD Radio on social media. Up next, Philadelphia Police Commissioner Kevin Bethel on Wake Up with Word with Solomon Jones.
Joining us now, Philadelphia Police Commissioner Kevin Bethel. Commissioner Bethel, good morning.
Good morning, Solomon. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
All is well. All is well.
All right. So, a whole lot going on in the city of Philadelphia. You know, one of the big things that happened, I believe last week, was this mass shooting that took place on Lemon Hill. How did that happen, and where are we in the investigation of what happened there?
As it relates to the how, I mean, we deal on a regular basis with young people surging in different parts of the city. On that day, around 6, a little after 6, the kids were over the Smith Playground. They were in the 39th, one of our districts. At some point, they found themselves up onto Lemon Hill in a very secluded pocket back there. And unfortunately, just like many of these events, when we get that convergence of activity, unfortunately, we get individuals who oftentimes encounter each other, and all of a sudden we get a significant level of gunplay. Those are the challenges. Those are hard to prevent. The park is a public space, but we're moving forward in investigation. Homicide is doing a great job. We have a lot of evidence to go through. I think we're up to at least 5 handguns being used during that episode. One we know to be an automated, a switch used on one of them to make it automatic fire. But we're confident that we'll bring the investigation in. There's no cameras, and so we have to do a lot more detailed work. But I'm confident my team will bring this case in.
Did anybody post anything from it on social media?
Yeah, the only posting I saw, I'm sure may have been some other postings. The primary one was the individual who captured the rapid gunfire that was posted on through social media. It's very dark up in that area. Yeah, I know the mayor's had some conversations now around what it looks like for lighting in the park space overall. But in this case, it was very, very dark lit up there. Even for us, we have to bring light trucks up into the space so we can properly process the machine the area until daylight. So it was a challenge.
Now that happened at night, correct?
That's correct. Around 8:30 it starts. We get a call from the mansion. My folks are out there moving folks out in the outer perimeter. No indication that there was anything negative, just a large group. There's always, the city, Solomon, just as I do, there's always folks up on the hill in Lemon Hill. It's a great place. The pavilion's a great place for families to come in and have fellowship. And so there was no indication at that time other than a large group of kids, young people starting to come into the area that it was going to turn violent. So,
now the park has a curfew that's specific to the park. Is that right?
I think there's a time. I'm not sure what that time period is, but I'm sure there's some type of. I think there's curfew specifically for the pavilions. Okay. People who book the pavilions have a certain time that they have to be out. Mm-hmm. But I think overall, I don't think there's. You can't be in the park after a certain period of time. I'm not 100% sure what that time period is, but I'm sure there's probably something like that.
Okay, so the park is like a separate district. Is it still the 90th? Is that still what it's considered?
No, the park is incorporated into, we had at one point the park police in 92nd, 90th, but when Commissioner Ramsey came in 2009, realized, we were going through some staffing reductions at the time. Okay. And so each one of the districts, the borders has parks within the 22nd, 16th, 14th, 5th. All of them have portions of the park. And that now comes under their responsibility.
Got it. So North and West Philly.
Yes, West Philly, and yes. Okay. And then we're northern part too, going into the 14th district as well.
So in terms of what happens with Lemon Hill going forward, because it's an important place. It's a beautiful place, but it's also a place where they're going to be using it for I believe the FIFA World Cup or it's part of the celebration in 2026. So what lessons do we learn from what happened there and how you secure the park going forward, for these big events?
Well, I think, I shared this when the mayor had the press conference. There's one thing to have unplanned events, broad CB Moore, 300 kids surge into the space. Someone pulls out a gun and fire versus having a very planned, orchestrated, stage. I think the Roots is a classic example. Mm-hmm. We had maybe 60, 75,000 people, maybe more, who converged into the park over, Saturday and Sunday, had a great time, and no incidences. Why? Because, it's planned. My men and women are layered out there. Security is layered out there. It's another layer. It's very structured and access is not gained by everyone. Mm-hmm. And so that's the expectation going into 2026, that there'll be, we're already planning now for a whole plethora of events like that. And so I don't anticipate the concerns around this bleeding over. But just like anything, Solomon, you cover, any lone wolf in these environments, these are soft targets. And so even if we go beyond just two combatants going at each other, any of these places can be a soft target just because of how they're set up. So we'll continue to work hard to make sure the next year it goes well, and I have no doubt that it will.
Okay, so let's talk about 2026, because there's a lot that's happening in the city around this 250th anniversary of America, centered on Philadelphia. You know, what does the police force do to kind of scale up and be prepared for that? But while also patrolling, you know, our regular neighborhoods and stuff, you know, in the summer and as those things go on.
Well, you know, I work off the 7 P's: proper planning prevents a piss poor performance, right? Mm-hmm. And so part of what we do is the mayor, you know, if you heard, intergovernmental approach. So this cannot do, you know, what happens next year in by yourself. It's going to require a significant and comprehensive effort by all of us, every cabinet, every department of city. The mayor has made that very clear. And so, you know, we work with our federal partners, our state partners, or we bring in additional assets from our state partners and federal partners to help us next year. Because for the clear dynamics that you described, we still have a city to run, as well as be able. But we've been able to demonstrate that. I mean, I think if you took this weekend, Pride parade, Pride events, you know, bike event, the, you know, Roots event, some protests in between all of that, and we're still able to effectively manage those events as well as the city overall. So we have developed, we have a really good team, our special operations team, our patrol assets. My men and women are very proud of the work that they've been able to do to be able to accomplish it all. And so we will plan next year with it, you know, Office of Emergency Management. There's everybody. It's an all hands on deck for next year, Solomon, to be able to pull off the various events that are going to happen. But I think we'll be fully prepared for that next year's events and be able to do exactly what you described: host events, make it go successfully, but at the same time, you know, we have a city to run, and we have responsibility to all of our residents to not take our focus off the efforts that are underway. Yeah,
we're talking with Philadelphia Police Commissioner Kevin Bethel about some police stories and issues that we have in the city of Philadelphia. So got to talk about former Philadelphia police officer Mark Dahl. He was convicted in court this week. He had been fired after a shooting happened in Kensington where he shot somebody through the car window. What do we learn from this particular case, and how do you apply those lessons going forward?
I mean, what do you learn? I think first and foremost, you know, we accept their, you know, as I've said it before on both cases. I mean, you know, we went before a jury. You know, the jury, we accept those terms of the jury. That's our duties as citizens and as of this state and in the United States as well. Some of the things that we learn, we continue to train our men and women to make sure that they are able to effectively deal. These are very challenging situations. You know, when you have an officer, as he indicated, feared that the individual had a gun, and those things happen in seconds. And so they can be very, very challenging for our officers. And so it's important that we train them consistently, you know, we using our reality-based training and those other tools to be able to meet the moment. So we don't have a situation where an officer, you know, under belief that the man is armed and has a weapon, fires into the vehicle. And the other part of that is also how we communicate, you know, and making sure that, you know, we've been very intentional about slowing things down, making sure that we ensure that the stories and these things happen so fast, but there's been this speed to get out information, and making sure that we as an organization do right by the men and women by making sure that when we do present the information that is to the best of our abilities, accurate. And if it's not, then we need to make sure that we don't put that information out until we have all of the facts. And so there's a lot of learnings you can take from that. And we will continue to do that and grow as an organization. But I also will say, you know, we're encountering over 2,000 people a year with guns. And all of those cases, majority of those cases, it does not result in gunfire or killing someone or being shot. So, you know, the men and women continue to do an effective job. And when they encounter individuals who do have a weapon, but would also recognize we still have a long way to go to make sure that we're preparing our young officers for the threats that they meet on a daily basis.
So we're entering summertime. It's June, and kids are going to be out of school. Things change in summer. So this summer, how do police patrol our neighborhoods, keep our neighborhoods safe, given some of the things we've seen in schoolyards and recreation centers? We had the shooting at the Logan schoolyard. Like, how do we patrol the community in this summer, given the changing conditions on the ground?
Well, first and foremost, we work with our rec department, Commissioner Seuss Lawson and the parks to make sure that, many of our school officers who work the schools, school beat officers will shift to our playgrounds and our pools, particularly those areas where we have significant levels of problems. But I would also tell your audience, Solomon, that despite some of the reason that many of these locations get a lot of attention is because they're so few and far between, right? That our parks and our rec centers and those locations, our pools and our schools continue to be the safest places for our kids to be, despite sometimes the focus and the attention, rightfully so. But it is because we know those as be sacred spaces. So I encourage people to continue to go to those sites. We will shift our deployment into those specific areas where we have, but much of what we also rely on is the support of the community. Many of those communities are the ones who keep these locations set. The staff of those rec centers, those programs, the athletic programs, our PAL centers, all of those are a collective effort. We can't do this work by just policing ourselves alone, and I think that it is relying on the community also to create the order and maintenance around these entities, these places who are sacred places for our kids. So we've shifted every year into that posture, and we'll be in that same posture this summer. And then I think the mayor has put out a lot of information around what young people can do to be able to look for things to do this summer. And so I think all of that collective effort from all of city government, in addition to what we'll do in our patrol assets, we'll have a successful and fruitful summer.
All right. That is Philadelphia Police Commissioner Kevin Bethel.
You're tuned in to The Week on Word. Stay connected on the go with the new and improved Word Radio app. Search Word Radio in your app store. Stream every show with increased clarity. Easily access Word TV, EcoWord, and Livelihood. Remember, Black Media Matters. Get the new and improved Word Radio app today. Available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. You're listening to the Week on Word podcast. To learn more about our programming, simply visit WURDradio.com. Our last conversation in this episode features reporter Jasmine Wright in conversation with Dr. James Peterson on Evening WURDs.
My favorite national political reporter is joining us again here on Evening WURDs. Jasmine Wright, national political reporter from Allbritton Journalism Institute. And notice, here to talk about the administration's Maha report and Larry Hoover. Jasmine Wright, welcome back to Evening WURDs.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be back.
No, it's always great to have you, Jasmine. I appreciate you taking time because I know your schedule is mad these days. I do really want to talk about the Larry Hoover commutation. But first, I don't watch a whole lot of the White House briefings, Jasmine. I'll be honest with you. It's difficult to watch the White House press secretary do the kind of, tap dancing around the truth that she does. That's me saying it, folks, not Jasmine Wright. But I did see your exchange with her around the Maha report. Obviously, they have since made changes since you raised this question with them. But right. Can you let our listeners into this story a little bit? Talk a little bit about what you and the team at Notice discovered with the Make America Healthy Again report and how you rose that issue directly with the White House in the briefing last week.
Yeah, well, it started 2 weeks ago after the HHS department, run, of course, by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as the secretary of the Health and Human Services Department, released their Maha report, which is what they call the golden standard of science, really meant to kind of set the HHS team led by RFK Jr. and the MAHA movement really kind of define what they believe is a science when it comes to these crucial issues, including children's use, and what children are ingesting and other really issues like that MAHA has been so focused on. And so it was really supposed to be their premier health commission, the first one since Donald Trump has been in office and since RFK Jr. has been in office. But what we found at Notice, including my two colleagues, Margaret Mano and Emily Kennard, who are actually two fellows from our Allbritton Journalism Institute, part of AJI Notice, they went through all the citations. So the little fine print at the end of each page, there's about 522. It took them 5 days. They went through each citation because Margaret got a tip from a source that the citations were a little funny. And that's exactly what they found. In those 522, they found 7 citations that do not exist. And when I say do not exist, I mean take that as literally as possible. They searched for them online.
They're a footnote to nothingness. They're a footnote to nothingness.
Did not exist at all. Other things that they found were broken links, were papers that were real, but the way that it was formatted or the way that it was written out in the report itself was incorrect. But if you go back to those 7, just unreal links, basically, that doesn't just happen out of nowhere. And so my colleagues reached out to the people that the links are supposed to be authored by, saying, is this some sort of mistake? And basically all those folks got back to them and say, I never wrote that, or I wrote a similar piece, but it's not called that, and nor is it with authors. These folks are in the scientific and medical community, and they really want to be helpful. They actually love when their research is. As
an academic, it's always a boom when your work is cited. That's
particularly highlighted by the federal government, especially the medical part of the federal government, which we know is consistently on board. And they didn't exist, and so they went back to HHS, and HHS didn't answer them. And the first time that we heard an answer after about more than 24 hours is when I asked in the White House briefing room, and I asked 2 very simple questions. I said, basically, we know that some of these links don't exist because we went through great pains to confirm with the people who they say they're supposed to be authored by, and they said they didn't write them. So one, does this White House trust the information that's coming out of the HHS, the Health and Human Services Department? And Karen Long-Levitt, the press secretary, said yes. And then I asked, well, how? But she basically called it a formatting error and said that those would be fixed. And then I asked, how are these reports put together? And are they put together by AI, artificial intelligence? And the reason why I asked that is because it was kind of going around in the scientific community when this story started exploding, because, when you create scientific material through AI, sometimes it basically just invents links. It invents citations. And so that's kind of close to what my colleagues found here. And she said she didn't know. And we still don't have an answer to that second one. Now they have, like you said, gone and updated the report.
Well, they had to because of your reporting. They had to.
Yes. And it was, it's a very clean, clear story about something that they did wrong. And so they have gone up and they have updated it. I got a lot of texts from people within the administration saying, if you, in case you missed this, we updated it. And still my colleagues found that there was not factual information included in the update. And so I think it raises a really serious question, because RFK Jr., as we've talked about on this show, is somebody who his credibility is doubted.
He's a conspiracy theorist. I'm saying this, Jasmine. He's a conspiracy. You don't have to say it. He's a conspiracy theorist. He does not always move based on facts when it comes to health and science, period.
There are a lot of things that he said that have been controversial, to say the least. A lot of things that the medical community has outright denied, pushed back on, said it's not true when he cites things about vaccines and about other issues. But also just larger than him is the MAHA movement, which are really trying to gain credibility because they are focusing on things about children, on natural remedies that they believe work in some ways against conventional wisdom and scientific information, but in some ways not, right? And so they're trying to gain more credibility, but it's really difficult in the medical community to gain credibility when you don't do the small things right. People may say, why do I care if their citations aren't correct? Because that means that somebody is not doing the small things correct. And the question that we pose is, if you're not doing the small things correctly, how can people trust you to do the larger things correctly?
Yeah, I just want to take that just a step further. In the academic world, when your citations are off it completely erases the credibility of the authors of that research. So if they're citing things to make cases, they're saying this is their words, this is the gold standard of an American public health report. If they're citing things that don't exist, it undermines their very own claim. Now, I'm not sure that this administration cares about those things, to be honest with you, Jasmine, but I'm really glad that you all do. I mean, for folks listening to this and hearing this for the first time, because maybe some of our listeners are like me, we can't stomach too many of these White House briefings. Just from an objective point of view, what does this mean in terms of this particular health department? I mean, we're seeing other stories like the pulling of $690 million for bird flu research at Moderna. We're seeing the cuts and the firing. We're seeing the conflict between the CDC. The CDC has contradicted Secretary Kennedy, RFK Jr. on his stance with children and the COVID vaccine
for pregnant women.
Yeah. So there's
all during the last 2 weeks. I mean, to answer your question, I think that that when we're talking about why should people care, it is because the government is a serious place, just point blank, right?
We need serious people there, Jasmine.
Serious place. And the HHS department covers so much. It is a health and human human department, and health and human services department. And it's one of the largest departments that we have in the federal government. It employs thousands of people, and it makes really important decisions on COVID vaccines, on bird flu, you name it. Those decisions that need to be made by the federal government are coming out of this department. And so people are really trusting, particularly when we're just a few years out of a global pandemic, are really trusting and want to trust what information is coming out of HHS. So when you see these types of mistakes, it does, for a lot of people, particularly in the medical community, raise a question of what information are these folks using? How are they coming to their conclusions? Are they starting with the conclusion and then backtracking and finding evidence to support that conclusion? Or are they researching and allowing the evidence to lead them to a conclusion, right? Those are two different instances. And those things can affect people's lives. And I'll just say, just at the end of the day, the MAHA community, is not just RFK. There are people who have real political power. There are people who power that movement. And regardless of who their kind of spokesperson is, because right now, for all intents and purposes, it is RFK, they want to be taken seriously. And these type of things do not help. And so I think one question that I know has been raised is, how long do they keep RFK Jr. if they do at all, right? Maybe they do. Maybe they stick with him because they realize that, his voice as HHS secretary is the most powerful. But if you continuously see these type of mistakes, not just this MAHA report, but of course, the conflicting information coming out of the CDC, the conflicting information coming out of the FDA, the conflicting information coming out of the NIH cuts, the National Institute of Health, which does a lot of research for a lot of Americans' own good. People will start to ask, how is that helping this country? And so I think that these are things that when they are looking for credibility, they really have to get right, particularly when it comes to the scientific community.
Yeah. I mean, it just looks like a mess for folks looking from the outside. And thank you for your reporting. I'm still reeling a little bit for our conversation about the RFK's leadership at HHS. I before we move on to Larry Hoover, just one little last button on this piece. You mentioned that there may be the administration may take a look at him eventually, say, hey, there's too much controversy here, and they might move on. There's nothing in your reporting that you're seeing that they're considering a change.
No, not. And I meant that the MAHA movement. So not the MAHA movement. The question is whether or not they do look at that, because they really want to be taken seriously by the scientific community. And the question is, if these type of things continue, whether or not that becomes an issue.
Got it. Thank you for the clarifications. Want to make sure we're clear also for our listeners. Your most recent piece up at Notice, I don't know if this is the most recent, but a recent piece of yours up at Notice is Trump has commuted Larry Hoover's sentence. I'm trying to make sense of this, Jasmine. I mean, this is something that amongst certain sectors of the Black community is really celebrated. In fact, like my cousins and them, they first thought that this was like a full pardon. Like that's the way they received this news. It is not that. Talk a little bit about your reporting on this and how in the world does President Trump even know who Larry Hoover is?
Honestly, that's a good question.
I have some answers, but we're not going to talk about it. I have some answers for that, but we're not going to talk about that here.
I asked somebody in the White House, I was like, please send me a video of Trump listening to an NBA YoungBoy song. Somebody who also received a pardon.
Exactly.
And I have yet to get it. I'll tell you.
You're not going to get that.
No, I mean, I think it's actually a really fascinating story, and it says a lot about where we are now. So to clarify, you're right. He got a federal pardon. So that pardons all of his federal charges, but he has a lot of state charges, basically adding up to 200 years. And he's been serving a state charge since the 70s. So, if you do the math, that's, a little over 50 years, not yet 70 years. 200 years. So unless he gets a state pardon, he's going to stay incarcerated. But the difference is that he will leave the Colorado facility. That's thought to be one of kind of the harshest prisons.
It's a supermax in Colorado.
The conditions aren't great. And moving them back to Illinois to be closer to where his family is in Chicago. I'm also from Chicago.
Can you talk a little bit about the lore around Larry Hoover from the perspective of someone who's from Chicago?
Yeah, he's an icon. He started the GDs, the Gangster Disciples, whether you like him or not. He's either iconic or he's infamous in the way that he was really thought to, particularly by the legal community at the time, and whether that's law enforcement, lawyers, to be kind of the father of gang violence in Chicago. And so if you look at his rap sheet, it's really long for a reason, right? It's not just, fraud cases or anything like that. It's not just running this kind of a criminal enterprise, but it's a long list of things. He first got arrested in the 1970s for murder, and then they continued to investigate him. And so, Larry Hoover is somebody that has really permeated not just Chicago culture, but I would say national and world culture. He's constantly in songs, Free Larry Hoover concerts. People have T-shirts. He has become this entity of its own because he was the co-founder of the Gangster Disciples in Chicago. And so he's somebody that has cultural acclaim. And that has come with, over time, a litany of celebrity advocates that want to see him out of prison. And some of those celebrities, like Kanye West, that have Donald Trump's ear or talk to people within the White House camp. So not only, I'm sure, does Donald Trump actually just know who Larry Hoover is, because he's somebody that's always been kind of interested in crime in particularly larger cities. Chicago is a place that, not maybe so much in this last 3 months, but certainly when it comes to crime, but certainly has always been a place that Donald Trump has talked about when it comes to crime. So I have no doubt that Donald Trump knows who Larry Hoover is. Now the question is, how do these pardon applications get in front of him? And a part of that is because he had so many celebrity advocates. Obviously, Rick Ross, who has contact with this administration, Jay-Z, those type of people have always called for a pardon for Larry Hoover. And so, I think one focus of this administration, because Donald Trump, to the best that we know, and he has said it multiple times, is not going to run again. Not only is he barred by the Constitution, he says he doesn't want to. As people push him to think about it again, he's basically shut it down every single time. And so he is running as a lame duck president. He is not running. He exists and as a lame duck president. And so, I think a lot of times you see people wait until they're the last year or the last
month or the last couple of days.
If you look at the precedent set by former President Obama. If you look at the precedent set by former President Biden, right? And instead, Donald Trump has really been focused on getting these pardons out of the door, in which he feels that the government has been weaponized against the person who was convicted, that the Biden DOJ targeted them as he feels that he has been targeted, or that the system really gave them just kind of an overcharged conviction, or too much time in jail that doesn't match the the rap sheet, basically. Now, I think if you would talk to people, particularly those who were involved in his sentencing in Chicago, or those who, his family members were impacted by, some of Larry Hoover's actions, or the kind of cascading effect of what they were, I think they would say that the time does match. But, obviously 200 years is a lot, and he's 73. And so, he got this federal pardon, but it does not. Notice was good enough to be able to break the story. That was my story. But he does not get to leave incarceration completely because he has the state charges.
And so a fascinating story, by the way. Thank you for the work as always, Jasmine. But in terms of his family members, or Jay-Z or Kanye West or any of these folks who are pushing for this, they're not saying he didn't commit these crimes. They're saying that he's been reformed in jail, that the time is too much.
that he's reformed in jail. I mean, if you look at Larry Hoover and his lawyers and his family, have made basically repeated requests to shorten his sentence over the last almost 10 years or so. Particularly, I think the first one was in 2020, or around that time, after they were able to pass the First Step Act in Donald Trump's first term, which was basically a criminal justice reform bill that in some ways allowed people to try to shorten their sentences, and it expanded who would fall under that application. So that was his first time. And he didn't get it during Trump's administration, despite having these kind of celebrity advocates. They applied again, I believe, during the Biden administration, and they were rejected. And so then they applied again, and obviously it went through. And if you look at the way that the president has kind of structured his pardon system, I think it looks a lot different than how the Biden team did it, but also how he did it in the first term, because typically the pardon structure is based out of the Department of Justice. And those are the folks who are leading on what applications should eventually be put on the president's desk. But what we're seeing now is that the White House is taking a leading role with the general counsel, and with Alice Marie Johnson, the pardon czar, who was also incarcerated and then got a pardon from Trump in his first term. And so they've really kind of started to rewrite the process of getting pardons. And so you're not just seeing people like Larry Hoover, NBA young boy, get federal pardons, because again, that is only what the president can do, only touch what has happened federally, but get federal pardons. But you're also seeing a lot of white collar, a lot of people who
a lot of tax fraud cases getting pardoned.
Fraud cases getting pardoned because they are kind of making that appeal to President Trump that fits within what he believes are appropriate charges. Back to the the weaponization of government, or unjust or overcharging people, giving them too many years that for a victimless crime, et cetera, et cetera.
Got a tough question for you, Jasmine. On Tuesdays, we do a little segment called Side Topic Tuesday, and because the Philadelphia Eagles have been now decided they're going to do HBO Hard Knocks, we've been asking all of our guests and our listeners to share with us, what reality TV show would you want to be in if you could choose one to be on?
This is not a hard question for me at all. I would be on like the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, because they're actually rich. And so I think if I were to be on it, then I would be actually rich. I would produce for 90 Day Fiance, because I think that they have the best producers in the whole land. And those people are so sneaky. They get those people into all types of conflict. And it is just the best reality TV show.
Look at Jasmine Wright with those expert answers to the Side Topic Tuesday question. Jasmine Wright, national political reporter, Allbritton Journalism Institute. Notice the most recent piece on Notice is Trump has commuted Larry Hoover's sentence. Jasmine, again, we really appreciate the work that you're doing and your reporting around all these important issues.
You're listening to The Week on Word. Word is for the people, by the people. When you tune in, share, or give, you're keeping a vital platform alive. Let's grow together and keep pushing the conversation forward. Support today at wordradio.com/support.
We all we got, we all we need.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Week on Word. Let's stay connected. Sign up for our newsletter and listen to us online at WURDradio.com and on the Word Radio app.